For better or worse, Atlus has established time and time again that they like to re-release their games with shiny new additional content. Basically DLC, but with the added bonus of having to buy the full game again. The Persona series is probably the most prevalent example. Recently, Persona 5 got this exact treatment with the release of Royal, featuring new characters, a new dungeon, an extra playable semester adding roughly 30 to 50 hours of gameplay, and best of all, you started each fight with a fresh set of bullets in your magic toy gun, making the gun actually useful. It's all based on the enemy's cognition anyway, so why did your ammo not reset at the start of each fight in the first place? It's not like they would know how many shots you used in the... You know what? Doesn't matter. Today, we're here to talk about the latest and potentially greatest free release of an Atlus game, Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance. First launched in November of 2021, exclusively for the Nintendo Switch, SMT V was the long-awaited 5th entry in Persona's parent series, Shin Megami Tensei. Fun fact, it is also the first Atlus game to release simultaneously worldwide, something that has become standard at this point. That's not really relevant at all, I just think it's neat. Here on Tin and Max, I'm Tin by the way, we didn't really cover it when it first came out. At the time, I was still new to making this kind of video, and recording gameplay on the Switch was more of a pain in the ass than I was willing to deal with. So real quick, here's my review of the original SMT V. I liked it. When I played it initially, I was just starting to dip my toe in the wider web of Atlus games. A few months previously, I played the remaster of Nocturne, my first non-Persona Atlus game, and really liked it. Made a whole video about it and everything. But even with that game fresh in my mind, I didn't have much of an idea on what to expect with SMT V. Nocturne being as good as it is, did leave me with pretty high expectations. Expectations that were more or less met. I had a good time with SMT V Classic. I think a big part of that was just how much inspiration it pulled from Nocturne. The SMT3 influence on SMT5 is very obvious. I honestly think it's the closest to an actual sequel the Megami Tensei series gets. Even though 5 is technically a sequel, but not an actual sequel. Whatever, the point is SMT5 felt like a spiritual follow-up to a fantastic and classic JRPG that I had basically just played. It didn't exactly hit the same highs as Nocturne, but I feel like it did manage to hit plenty highs of its own. Shin Megami Tensei V, like pretty much every Atlus game, featured some top-of-the-line turn-based combat using Atlus's own press turn system. With press turn, you get a certain number of actions you can take based on how many members you have in your party. These actions include attacking, using items, talking to demons, etc, you get the idea. You can gain more actions per turn by targeting enemies' weaknesses, and the same is true for your enemies, meaning if you're not careful, they can and will exploit your weaknesses to give themselves an edge. It goes much deeper than that, and I really can't express how much I love the press turn system. It's one of my favorite battle systems in all of gaming. The required strategic use of exploiting your enemies' weaknesses while protecting your own is just so damn fun and extremely satisfying when done well. Press turn also pairs wonderfully with the demon fusing mechanic that allows you to smash demons together to make even stronger ones. The demon fusion system allows you to make the perfect team for almost any encounter. Add that in with the press turn system and you have something that is just masterful. Seriously, the combo of demon fusion and press turn is something I don't think I will ever get tired of, so obviously I loved its return in SMT V. Along with the great battles and the challenges they present, you also spend a lot of time exploring the semi-open world. It's super fun to interact with all the demons just kind of hanging around, and seeing them roam around the overworld in real time is cool as hell, even if the Switch struggled to keep up at times. Well, most of the time. Story-wise, I wasn't blown away or anything, but I liked it enough. It could have been because I had played Nocturne just before, but the story of SMT V felt like a more, I don't know what the word is, not necessarily simplified, but straightforward? Sure, let's go with that. A more straightforward version of SMT3's story. Well, not one-to-one. There are some blatant similarities that made it feel a bit too familiar. I mean, the Demi-Fiend even showed up as one of the several Day 1 DLCs. Goddamn Day 1 DLCs. I love Nocturne, so I didn't totally hate SMT for taking so much inspiration from it, but I still can't help but feel like it ended up being a sanitized version of an older, better game at times. Don't get me wrong though, I still liked it, and beyond all that, the thing that held me back from really getting into SMT V was the platform it was stuck on. Nothing against the Switch, but it's no secret that it's a much weaker console than what Sony or Microsoft had at the time. Shin Megami 5 definitely felt restricted by that weakness, so when Vengeance was first announced, I was stoked just to have the game coming to the PS5. I prefer playing games on my PlayStation, it's what I like, so that honestly would have been enough for me to buy the game again. Definitely not at full price, mind you, but still. Yet Vengeance isn't just a basic port. In true Atlus fashion, it's a bigger and mostly better re-release featuring brand new exclusive content. Toting not just a whole new storyline while retaining the original story, it also features a ton of gameplay tweaks and changes that will hopefully make it an overall better experience. So is it? Is it an overall better experience? Did they successfully improve an already great game? Short answer is yes. Vengeance slaps. Long answer is, well, the rest of the video. Stick around. Before Vengeance released, I started to replay the OG version just to remind myself what it was like. I hadn't really played it again since I beat it the first time around, and unfortunately I didn't get the chance to finish said replay, but regardless, it did give me a good idea of what the initial version offered, and I still find it to be a pretty banger game. However, Vengeance adds its own fair share of new content and makes some significant changes that do make it an even bangier game. Bangier? Is that a thing?
No.
One of the biggest changes, if you ask me, is the ability to save when and where you want, besides cutscenes and during battle, obviously. In the original game, you could only save at these big blue light thingies called ley line fountains that could be found around the map. When you lose a fight in SMT 5, which you will at some point, you get booted back to the title menu and lose any progress made since your last save. So dying in some random battle means you could end up losing hours of gameplay. Being able to save all willy-nilly makes this much less of an issue. Now, as a father of two busybody toddlers, a part of me really appreciates how frequently and easily you can save. At the same time, there's another part of me that feels like it takes away from the brutality of the game. In fact, Vengeance in general felt much easier. Although I'm not sure how much of that is the game itself or the fact that I've played a lot of Atlus RPGs in the last 3 years. I do still think the game provides a decent challenge, and if you really want some punishing gameplay, there is the new unlockable Godborn difficulty to try out, but outside of that, the game seems easier overall. SMT5 was already designed to be way more accessible to general audiences compared to something like Nocturne, and Vengeance just takes that a step further. My personal favorite quality of life update in Vengeance was made to the auto battle system. If you don't already know, most Atlus games have an auto battle system where with the simple press of a button, the fight speeds up a bit and all the actions are performed automatically, usually just the default melee attack. Well, SMT VV's auto battle lets you pick between different modes, one where your team will automatically use their magic based skills and one where they will use the default melee, more akin to the usual. The auto magic one is amazing because it's smart enough to have them target an enemy's weakness if you know it, making it so much faster and easier to burn through weaker enemies. This is a godsend when it comes to alleviating the long and monotonous grind to level up, without having to spend money, that is. Along with the auto battle thing, Vengeance also added consecutive battles. If you're being chased by more than one demon and a battle is initiated, you can fight multiple rounds of enemies in a row without returning to the overworld. Successfully defeating all baddies grants you extra experience points and money. Now take that and partner up with the new auto battle system and you have an insanely efficient way to level up your party. God, I love this. This change nearly completely removed a hang up I typically have with this entire genre. Naturally, grinding isn't gone entirely, but it's lessened enough that it doesn't feel super tedious to quote unquote get good. One of the other aspects besides the combat that I always loved in these games is the demons, or personas, whichever you prefer. They are so fascinating, and like I mentioned earlier, I was a fan of how SMT5 utilized them to bring life and substance to its world. Vengeance actually further built on this element as well. You can now visit demon haunts and chat with your demon buddies and even the proto-fiend. There is this relationship mechanic incorporated into this that allows demons to increase their stats as your relationship with them grows. The problem is that the whole mechanic ends up being a bit too shallow. It's neat, and you can improve their stats and whatever, but that's also what incense are for, so it doesn't really offer much beyond some extra demon dialogue. I don't mind its inclusion, but I also wouldn't miss it if it was gone. Plus, the gift giving thing is pretty useless due to the relationships leveling up at a consistent rate just by playing the game regularly, so why bother? A much better addition in the demon department is the new side quests that allow you to actually play as some of the demons. Admittedly, this whole thing is very much a novelty rather than a fully fledged game mechanic. You basically just walk or float around as a demon and interact with either the environment or other demons. It really doesn't get more advanced than that. Even then, I still think they did some cool stuff with it, like this one mission where you must solve a crime as Pixie by basically doing a riddle. Probably doesn't sound great when I put it like that, but trust me, it's better than it sounds. Some of them also provide some interesting lore bits, such as the one with Alice. It's eerie and gives a little peek inside her twisted head, which I loved. Speaking of Alice, she along with 10 other demons can become your navigator, helping you find items as you explore. The number of demon navigators available in the original was only 6, and Vengeance has bumped that number up to 17, so that's fun. Gotta love the variety. These changes are all nifty, but the most significant change in Vengeance is its brand new whole ass story. Early on, the game asks you a specific question, and your answer determines which story path you're put on. And when I say early, I mean very early. It's literally the first thing you do. The original story of Shin Megami Tensei V is still present in Vengeance as the Canon of Creation path, while the new stuff is called the Canon of Vengeance. I'll get a little spoilery in a second, but my general feeling on this new story path is very positive. My biggest issue with the OG story was how similar I felt it was to Nocturne's, like I mentioned earlier in the video. Comparatively, the new Canon of Vengeance story feels wholly unique to this game, rather than feeling like a retelling of another one. The ending does fall short in my eyes, but overall I love this new narrative much more than the old one. Specifically, the reason I don't love the ending, and this is spoiler territory, so jump to this time in the video to not be spoiled. I don't really think it's a major spoiler, but just in case. The Vengeance ending just felt too much like the Creation ending. It failed at the last second to maintain its uniqueness, and that's a bit of a bummer considering how much of a role it was on before that. In contrast to some other Atlus games, the new story concept for Vengeance felt better integrated into the original narrative. In fact, the story doesn't start to significantly differ until about the halfway mark. It goes in some fascinating directions that did a lot to make it feel like a brand new experience, even if it ends with the same final boss. The Canon of Vengeance features multiple endings like Creation does, but it only has 2 compared to Creation's 4. And again, I found the implementation of the multiple endings to be better done in the Vengeance path than the Creation one. Which one of the original game's endings you got came down to just selecting one of 3 dialogue options right before the finale. Nothing particularly wrong with that, but ironically, this is an area where borrowing from Nocturne would have really paid off. That game also has multiple endings, but which one you get is dependent on how you interact with characters throughout the story. How you respond to them determines how the game ends, and Vengeance brings this back in its new story path, sort of. It's much more simplified than what Nocturne had, basically just coming down to picking either the top response or the bottom response consistently, but still, I find this to be much more interesting than just picking an ending from a dialogue tree. Look, in the end, none of it makes that much of a difference. The original story was pretty good, and the new story is also pretty good. I just happen to like the new one more. Vengeance is probably the best use of Atlus's rampant re-releases thus far, as it not only brought the game to all platforms, but it also did a better job naturally integrating the new stuff. Royal is great, I love it, but there are times when the Royal specific content does feel a bit tacked on, especially if you played the original. Vengeance didn't really have that issue for me, at least until the very end, I guess. Plus it is chock full of quality of life changes that make it a better gameplay experience, like these Sonic style rails that create shortcuts around the overworld, or new demon fusion functions that make it much more convenient to use and navigate, and that's just the start. There's so many more. Vengeance is a way more accessible game than the already more accessible SMT 5, and I love it for that. If you've never played a Shin Megami Tensei game that doesn't have Persona in the title, then this is a good one to start with. If you have played the original, then I still think it's worth checking this one out too. I mean, 100% get it on sale if you can, but definitely check it out. I had a great time playing through Vengeance, and I'm about to continue to have a great time as I try to get as close to full completion as I can. If you did play this game, let me know what you thought of it in the comments below, and if you liked the video, then, like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from us, and I will see you in whatever we do next.